Senator Graham and Senator Bayh are with us in the studio this morning. And Senator Bayh, I must say, you really did set Washington on its ear when you said you would not run for re-election, basically because you said you thought the Senate had become dysfunctional. But you and Senator Graham have joined in a new effort, even though you've decided not to run again, to try to ease the partisan rancor. You sent a joint letter to Senate leaders Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell this week, asking that they convene a lunch of Republican and Democratic senators once a month on a regular basis. Senator Bayh, why did you do that, and why would that work? Why would that help?
Well, first, Lindsey Graham is my friend, and we need more friendships across the aisle because that's ultimately how you get principled compromise enacted. And part of this, Bob, was informed by my father's experience, where back in the day he might have philosophical or political differences, but you still reached out and tried to do the people's business. So little of that takes place because there's so little interaction among senators. We have the caucus systems, so the Democrats are over here, the Republicans are over here. They hardly ever meet to listen to one another. The only two times since I've been there where we've actually had a gathering of all 100 in kind of a serious setting to listen to one another was first at the time that President Clinton was impeached, didn't know how the trial was going to work. Secondly, immediately following 9/11. And in both of those cases, we acted more like Americans than Democrats or Republicans. We need more of that. That's why I think this idea that Lindsey and I are pushing is a good thing.
Have you had any response, Senator Graham?
Not that I know of. We probably should start with plastic forks and knives for the first ones, just see how this works. But he's dead right. We share a locker by the gym. I've got to know Evan, and when he announced he was going to leave the Senate, a lot of Republicans said, "Oh boy, we can pick up Indiana." First thing I thought of was, "Oh no," because at the end of the day, Evan has shown a willingness to reflect Indiana values, which is to find middle ground because it's in the middle of the country. I hope people will respond to the lunch, and I hope it will over time mean something. I know it's silly for most Americans to think this is newsworthy, but it is.
But it does sort of emphasize how bad the situation has gotten that you would propose this.
It's almost tribal, Bob, and I think Lindsey's right. Most Americans are probably listening to this and go, well, that's so basic, it's silly. But the caucus system really is used as an instrument of control, party control. The information that's provided very often is designed to lead to a particular result. You spend a lot of time talking about, well, my first day in the Senate, literally my first day, first caucus meeting, we were already talking about the next election. It never stops. And so if things political are constantly at the forefront of your thinking, it's difficult to make the kind of policy progress that you need.
I want to talk about some of the issues that have really split Washington, and I think the country actually is split right down the middle on a lot of these things. And the first thing I want to talk to you about it, Senator Graham. You have been working behind the scenes with the administration in an effort to have these terrorists. We can't decide whether to put them in civilian trials or before military tribunals. You've been working to try to convince the administration to do that. And just to show you how harsh the rhetoric is, how harsh the situation is, the fact that it has come to light that the administration may be considering putting them before military tribunals prompted this ad, not from the right, but from the political left this morning, a full-page ad in the New York Times that shows President Obama somehow morphing into George Bush. And that just shows that whenever there's an issue, the people on either side, both sides, don't spare anything. It's fire all guns on all fronts politically.
It used to be when a nation was at war, we were able to get along better than we are today. Remember the General Petraeus ad? That just blew me away. Joe Lieberman got run out of the Democratic Party. I'm getting a lot of grief because I do believe it's best to close Gitmo safely. So what I've told the President is that you're now my Commander-in-Chief. Detainee policy in this war is hard, it's complicated, but we must get it right. We would be better off as a nation if we could close Gitmo safely and start a new prison that he could use that the world would see as a better way of doing business. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, if he's not an enemy combatant, who would be? The President's getting unholy grief from the left. But Bob, I think we're at war. I don't believe Khalid Sheikh Mohammed robbed a liquor store. He's the mastermind of 9/11. We've used military commissions before. I'm a military lawyer. I have a lot of faith in the military legal system. I'm willing to give robust due process. There's a place for civilian court, but I will stand by my President to make rational detainee policy. We've got 50 people at Gitmo that are too dangerous to be let go, that will never go through a normal criminal trial. Let's create a new legal system so they'll have their day in court.
So where is this situation right now?
Well,
because
we're,
basically, as I understand
yeah.
it, what you've said to the White House is if you will agree to try these people in military tribunals,
Some of them.
I will help you in getting the Republican votes that are needed to close Guantanamo.
Right. President Bush said we needed to close Guantanamo, but Senator McCain said it'd be better to close it. I believe that. We need a legal system that gives due process to the detainee, but also understands they didn't rob a liquor store, we're at war, and some of this information is very sensitive and classified. So where we're at now is, can this administration reverse course on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, which I think would be an act of leadership well received by the public. He's getting beat up badly from the left, but the ACLU theory of how to manage this war, I think, is way off base. And those who want to waterboard on the right and believe that we should keep Gitmo open forever and use any technique to get information, I think they're equally off base. We got to win this war within our value system, but understand that it's a war.
Do you think, Senator Graham, that if the administration would agree to what you want to do, put them before military tribunals, do you think, at least 5 of them, do you think you can get the Republican votes to close Guantanamo and open another facility in this country? Because that's going to require a considerable amount of
I can't do it by myself, but I think if we could get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and the co-conspirators 9/11 back in the military commission, it'd go down well with the public. But I'm going to need General Petraeus, Admiral Mullen, people not in public office. I'm going to need people from the Bush administration who tried to close Gitmo to put aside partisanship, rally around this president, stand by his side, and say, let's close Gitmo safely. With that kind of help that will reassure Americans we're making a good, logical decision, we can do the things we need to do to get them back in the
Are you talking to any of those people
I'm talking
right
to
now?
anybody that will listen, because this is a very important issue. We will never win this war until we understand the effect that Guantanamo Bay has had on the overall war effort, and we'll never get the support of the American people if we can't prove to them that these folks that we're dealing with are not common criminals. We're going to keep you safe from them.
What about that, Senator Bayh? How does all that strike you?
Well, I think this dialogue you've just had with Senator Graham illustrates pretty clearly, Bob, some of the problems we have with our politics today. I mean, here Lindsey's a card-carrying Republican, thoughtful guy, and yet, he's trying to find some middle ground here. He gets excoriated by the, far right. The president is realizing, wait a minute, if I want to get some of what I want, I've got to compromise. He's getting excoriated in this ad you put on there by the far left. Everybody's got to check their ideology at the door and try and find practical solutions. So the president, under Lindsey's proposal, would get to make some major strides forward in the war of ideas of combating global terror. John McCain would be for that. Secretary Gates would be for that, thoughtful Republicans. And yet the American public could be reassured that we're going to try these guys in a setting that's secure, expeditious. It doesn't cost a lot of extra taxpayers' money. It's kind of a common sense thing, but both extremes rebel. And of course the public wonders, what the heck are they doing up there?
So you'd be all right with military tribunals?
I would, under the proposal that Lindsey has outlined. I think the administration gets something, and yet the public gets reassured.
Can I just add one thought? One reason it drives my train, I know how images are used against our troops in the Mideast. When you talk about waterboarding here at home, it may get some applause and make you feel good and make you feel tough. But it spreads like wildfire in the Mideast. If you're a young soldier walking the streets of Afghanistan and Iraq, you've just been put in danger. And when you talk about closing Gitmo or giving these guys constitutional rights as an American citizen and losing the fact that we're at war and reading them their Miranda rights as soon as we capture them, you lose the American people.
All right. Can I just interject one thing here? The administration would probably say, well, why shouldn't we have the flexibility to decide civilian or military on a case-by-case basis? And I would say to you, Bob, in sort of an ideal world, I could accept that argument. But if they want to, make progress in the war of ideas by eventually closing down Gitmo, they're going to have to give a little bit on that from their point of view, that perfect scenario. And that's why I think we got to find some common ground on this thing.
Let's talk about something else where somebody's going to have to find some common ground, and that is health care. The president is now talking about falling back on this seldom used, I hate to bring up this word because it's so difficult to explain, this seldom used parliamentary device called reconciliation to get this thing through the Senate. Bottom line of that is you can pass things in the Senate with just a simple majority if you go the reconciliation route. You don't need the 60 votes that most legislation requires. You said that if they try to do this by reconciliation, Senator Bayh, there will be a backlash that will result in nothing else getting done this year. Do you think they're going to use reconciliation?
I think that will probably happen, Bob, and I'm concerned that that might ultimately be the result. I mean, Lindsey and I have talked about some of the good work he's doing in energy. There's a chance for a financial regulatory reform bill and that kind of thing. But I do think that a couple things, and Lindsey will probably have a difference of opinion on this one. The bill that's going to come before the Senate is not the large omnibus health care bill. It is instead a corrections bill that gets out the Cornhusker kickback nobody liked, the special arrangement for Florida that many states objected to. It treats middle-class families a little bit better on the tax side of things. So it's not 1/6 of the American economy. It's a much smaller piece of legislation. And secondly, my guess is that a lot of your viewers and Americans are looking at this thinking, well, I don't understand all this procedural stuff. Let's focus on the substance. And if you think that it's actually going to be better for the American people, vote for it. And if you think it's going to be harmful, don't vote for it. And for me, it was a close call in my mind on this bill. This is not the way I would have written it. But for me, it eventually came down, we need to try something. It may not be perfect, but we need to try something. If it doesn't work exactly the way we'd hope, well, let's come back and correct it. But to just sit here year after year letting things fester, that's not the right way to go.
Well, reconciliation will be used to clean up the Senate bill to make House members happy. House members are going to vote for the Senate bill and they hate it. And the Senate and the President saying, okay, we're going to change what you don't like. And when it comes to the Republicans, y'all don't matter anymore. You just need a simple majority. So reconciliation will empower a bill that was very partisan. We've had reconciliation votes, but all of them had received bipartisan support. The least was 12 when we did reconciliation with tax cuts. So it is taking a partisan product and making it law. And I was in the Gang of 14. Remember the nuclear option with judges? When we almost changed the rules, I was one of 7 Democrats. 7 Republicans, 7 Democrats said, don't do that, don't pull the nuclear trigger. I'm glad I was in that gang. I got the heck beat out of me. We didn't change the rules. This will be the same effect as if you had changed the rules for judges. It would be catastrophic.
What will be, well, let me ask you that. What will be the result of that, Senator Bayh? Do you think that there will be such, well, maybe I should ask you, Senator Graham, will there be such a Republican backlash to this?
Not one Republican will vote for the reconciliation part of this. Not one Republican voted for the Senate bill, and you are dealing with 1/6 of the economy. And they will see this the same way Democrats saw our efforts to change the rule on judges unfair.
So what will Republicans do?
I think Evan's right. I think Republicans will stand up for the minority in the future. The minority in the Senate, if this happens, is forever changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not in the business of offering, I may offer my friend Lindsey a lot of advice. Usually it's not political advice.
Please.
But if I were in that business now, I'd say, look, if this gets passed, you're going to have some complaints about it, and let's argue over that in November. That's why you got elections. You want this or do you not want this? But don't stop all other progress for the country. We got other major issues out there. A, it's the right thing to do for the American people. B, I think for Republicans, it would run the risk of, playing into this party of no narrative that's out there.
Let's say that one way they can slow this down, Republicans, if they choose to do it, is to offer endless amendments.
Well, this could have an interesting endgame in the United States Senate that would be the subject of, what was his name, Alan Drury, or one of these novels. It could be the parliamentarian is going to be called upon to decide, is there a difference between a filibuster, which you're not allowed to do, or endless amendments, which would, after a while, sort of verge on the functional equivalent of a filibuster. And that poor guy is going to be put on the spot, and then conceivably the vice president could be called in to decide whether the parliamentarian should be overruled or not. And I think that's all going to come down to, look, are these legitimate amendments that after a period of weeks are really designed to improve the product, or are they just slowing things down?
What would happen, Senators, if the vice president, in an effort to end these debates, decided to overrule the parliamentarian?
Well, that will be a very interesting moment, Bob. I assume that our friends on the Republican side will think that they've been violated, and people on our side will say, look, this should be about substance rather than form. We think it's right for the American public, and let's have a debate about that between now and...
What do you think would happen? Because that may well happen.
Well,
Senator.
It would be catastrophic for the Senate. The minority's rights would have been overcome by rank partisanship at a time when the bill itself, the process led to it, wasn't so good. Please don't do this. Just please. I will work with you to find a smaller bill that the American people feel more comfortable about. Let's do a field goal in health care. Let's don't score a touchdown by ramming it down somebody's throat.